you need to be able to put yourself in some other else's shoes and be like, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what's going on. And I generally am a fairly forgiving person. I'm someone who haven't had my trust really betrayed on a level that would make me a cynical or a you know bitter person. But I'm very, very conscious of that. I don't know what's going on in people's lives, and not to pass judgment very quickly.
Beautifully said. It's this deep ability to put yourself in other people's shoes, which it sounds like, you keep at the forefront of your mind. And even I think about, small and silly examples sometimes back, say, like if a friend doesn't text back for like a week, my mind instantly goes to, okay, they don't care about this relationship anymore. But it's like, okay, wait, let me take a step back for a second and then realize that, hey, this person deserves just as much compassion. And what about the instances where I didn't text someone back for a week? Was that because I didn't care about the relationship, or was that because of something I was going through? And I think kind of that perspective shift is so powerful, and it comes from a really good place. So really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, man.
One of the things that I wanted to touch on is, the different types of content that you make. So, with having a variety of verticals, is there a type of content that you enjoy making the most? And what would that be? Or do you enjoy all of it equally?
No, I definitely enjoy making some stuff more than others. I would say that the sort of life content and the even the masculinity content are some of my favorite to make.
Hmm.
It tends to be the ones that don't maybe have the furthest reach, or also it's oftentimes somewhat controversial, and I fully understand that, and I own up to that. But I think that is some of the most fun for me to make for a number of reasons. I think that particularly when it comes to masculinity, I think that there's a lot of other creators out there and a lot of other influences out there that I disagree with. And I think that, young men today are in a kind of a weird situation. And so trying to be any kind of positive influence out there makes me feel like
Mm.
I could have an excised impact, an impact that's much larger than, for example, explaining a software engineering concept, which I also love doing. I'm very passionate about my career, about my job, about my field. And I
Mhm.
want everyone who could possibly be passionate about it as well to be able to explore that. But I feel sometimes I feel a little pigeonholed into that tech sector. And
Yeah.
so I would say that it's fun to be able to, explore other avenues.
Yeah, and when it comes to the masculinity content that you have made, I mean, you are speaking my language. I think that it's a concept that I have been consuming and studied and learned so much about, especially like the past like 2 to 3 years. And to your point, there are creators right now in the space that it's like, hey, you kind of hear their message and you're like, ooh, like I don't know if that's the best thing for our youth to be hearing. And then you take it upon yourself to try and share a different message. And I would say, although it might not have the widest reach, it could have the deepest for the subset of people that, it does hit. And one of the concepts that you talk about is, masculinity is, currently in a crisis. What do you think that crisis is, and why do you think we're currently in that place?
Sure. So I think that the world has changed undeniably over the past probably 40 years. And I think that women have made a lot of strides, and femininity in general has made a lot of strides. Obviously, I think that there's a lot less stigma around women making a lot of money, or women going into the workplace, or
Mhm.
women taking things upon themselves, which is all great. I think that additionally, masculinity has changed in the sense that we are responsible for a lot of things that we maybe weren't responsible before. Obviously, there was the whole Me Too movement, and there was a lot of things that were very good. But what that means is that I think masculinity hasn't had the sort of full rebirth in 2023 that makes sense. It doesn't have a
Mm.
an identity that's well defined. And so what that means is there's a lot of young men growing up today who are, that's the time, right? When you're supposed to become a man, when you're going from whatever age it is, but when you're supposed to become a man, all of a sudden now it's this nebulous thing, whereas it used to be somewhat better defined. And so I think that a lot of people are looking for that kind of, you should do this and be this and act like this. And it's not really out there. And a couple people who, again, I just don't agree with, came through really sort of loud and again, like confidently said, no, this is what a man is, or this is what a woman is. And it's very easy to gravitate towards that. And that's why I don't fault any of these impressionable young men for looking for idols, because there is somewhat of a void. And so I think that's where it is there was this gap. And it's easy to sort of, when you hear someone confidently saying something and they have what you would consider to be credibility, whether that's money or women or fame, to be like, no, what he's saying makes sense. And I think that it's not what I would agree with. And so I think that's what it is. I think it's this, it needs to be redefined, right? I think that that's what the crisis is the world changed. It's time to redefine it. And we need to redefine it in a way that makes sense given the current state of the world, and not trying to hark back to a time before things, changed. I think that we've made a lot of strides. I think the world is generally a better place than it was before. So let's not go back to that. Let's change it and make it what it makes sense to today.
Yeah, I completely agree. And going back to the point of not faulting young people for, grabbing on to the first thing that they find resonates with them. I remember reading this US Surgeon General announcement. I think it was released recently. There's currently an epidemic of loneliness in the US, and young people are getting particularly hit the hardest. I think it's something like the age group of like 13 to 24 or something of the sort, spend, 70% less time with their friends than they did like 2 decades ago.
Wow.
And then, yeah, it's insane. And thinking about, being in the pit of loneliness, for, a boy, a teenager, or a man, and, not having kind of that purpose that, you and I know is, what can kind of set men free. And then you then look towards these male role models, and it's like, okay, so this is what it is. And that's kind of, where the toxic lessons I think can come from. Does this quote resonate with you? It goes something along the lines of hard times create good men, and then good men create easy times, and easy times create weak men. And it's just like a circular cycle.
Yeah, I think that it does resonate with me. I think that, history would indicate that that's also, the case, right? But I think that the reasoning why that might happen is also a fault of just the sort of last step in that iteration of easy times create weak men could be stopped if, and that's something that I, think about all the time, is like, okay, I plan on being very successful. How would I sort of instill some of the characteristics of hardworking and humility and all these things into my kids? And it's something that I do struggle with. But I think if that sort of problem could be solved, I don't know if that necessarily has to happen. I don't know if the cycle necessarily has to happen. I think that the grandkids of very wealthy people generally are very spoiled and maybe aren't strong men or good men, whatever the quote is. I don't have the answer of how to solve that. Does it resonate with me? I would say yes. I don't think it's a fact of life like gravity that it's sort of doomed to happen, and we're just in this cycle and it'll repeat, and hard times are coming, and after that, there'll be another generation of great men.